Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Geisner for the Obligations of Memory podcast network for the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Education group on Facebook and YouTube. I'm with the Maggid family and Randi, who's written a very interesting book about her life called Beverly Hills Concentration Camp. And a little later, we're going to get into lots of details about the book, but we're really now in our second episode, and we're going to be talking to Randi just talked about her leaving to go to school, how she lived on her own. And I'm really now interested in how you, when you left, when you decided to date, and when you met Ben, and how did all that kind of go? And when you brought Ben to your mom's, what was that all about? And I'm going to ask you, Ben, when you brought Randi to your parents, how did that all work itself out? So go ahead, and you can take it, Randi, to start with.
Okay. Well, I was working in Los Angeles and I went to Chicago where Ben was living. I went there for an art show. I was in the art business. I went to a trade show and my friend in Los Angeles said, why don't you call Ben? He's a nice guy. He'll show you around Chicago, but you won't like him. And I like that, and actually it was sort of a boyfriend that told me this. And I'll just say I didn't have much luck in Los Angeles finding Mr. Right. I was at a time in my life where I did want to have a family. And I went to Chicago and I called Ben. And oh, actually, you know what? No, I did not call Ben that year. I went to the next year, a year later, I decided to call him. And I guess I wasn't ready the year prior. So I called Ben a year later, and I believe he might have been waiting for a year for this phone call. and we met him, I think I was staying at the Ritz-Carlton. I met him outside in the snow. And I remember he was wearing a piano scarf, like piano keys. And I looked at him and I thought, wow, he's kind of creative looking because he had a ponytail, but he had these like eyeglasses like an accountant. And I thought, how interesting, he's kind of business, kind of creative, like me. And I knew basically in the first 5 minutes that I was going to marry him.
Wow.
Yeah.
He didn't give you the cold shoulder, I guess.
No. But there were different things going on.
All right, before you tell me how you knew that,
Okay.
Ben, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and what you did in Chicago that attracted Randi.
Sure. So, well, I was actually born in New York.
I could tell that. I could tell that.
New York.
I'm from Allentown, Pennsylvania, not that far away.
I'm a Mets fan, no offense.
No, it's okay.
So my parents got divorced when I was 11 and my mom took me and moved to Israel. Never been there before. We had very little family there. It was a backwater in 1974. There was one TV station, black and white. And I grew up there. I went to high school there and the military. And then after the military, I moved back to New York briefly, and then back to Israel. I was going to Hebrew U, and then I got this offer from someone I knew for a job in Chicago. So I left basically for what I thought was going to be a summer job and turned into my career to go from Jerusalem to Chicago, and I ended up staying there for 6 years.
Can I ask you what your career is?
I'm in wholesale. I'm a national wholesaler of computer accessories.
Okay.
I've been in it since then. I've had a couple of companies, but basically in the same field for most of my professional life. And except for a stint I stopped for 3 years and I went back to school and I got a degree in film and television. So that's my hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in Chicago at Columbia College Chicago, and I already knew Randi by then. But so I was working in Chicago, And, I had an Israeli friend in LA, and he says, well, there's this girl, Randi, she's coming to Chicago, she'll give you a call. I'm like, okay. And she didn't.
Wasn't that quite what year what year is this?
92.
Wasn't that a little forward for you to be able to say, okay, she's going to call you? It's
Well,
if I would have done that with my wife, I don't think she would have. I had to make the call.
but she didn't even call. It took a whole year. Friend says the girl's going to call you. Okay, he's going to call me. Fine, great. That's awesome. But she didn't call. And then when she did call a year later, I remembered right away. She left me a voicemail, actually. And I remembered. And I called LA right away. And I'm like, okay, I got this voicemail. What's the deal? And so my Israeli friend in LA said, well, she's very nice. If you like her, I don't know. I don't think she has a boyfriend, which was kind of not true, but that's what he said. And so I got this voicemail on a Saturday. And so I called Randi back at the hotel, and I'm like, well, sure, let's get together, how about tomorrow? And she said, no, tomorrow I'm busy. Monday she was busy, Tuesday she was busy, and Wednesday she was flying back to LA. I said, okay, so when can I come? And she's like, well, today. And this is in the middle of a snowstorm in Chicago in January. But fortunately, the Four Seasons was not far from where I was living. So I actually walked over to meet her that night. And I did not know after 5 minutes we were going to get married, but the rest is history.
Well, I got to, before you answer, Liana and Adam, I assume you know this story, right? Are you picking up any new nuances here in the discussion?
No, I've heard this story many times.
Yeah, I've heard it a million times.
Okay, good. All right, Randi, I got to know what you were thinking in 5 minutes that he was the man that you were going to marry.
Well,
Because I am like a matchmaker, if I have all these kind of things that I have to, I'm a consummate networker. So I have this kind of matchmaking trait sitting inside me that I have to get answers to.
Who does Randi, by the way? Randi's
Yeah.
like that too.
I am like that. Ben stops me. He's like, don't get involved. But
Well, wait a second. Liana, are you feeling the pressure of Randi getting you involved yet, or not yet?
What do you mean?
Setting you up.
No, I have a long-term boyfriend, so I'm not too worried over here. When I did not have one, yes, I was I was a victim to that.
And Adam, what about you?
I have a girlfriend right now, but I definitely felt it beforehand, Let's speed things up. Let's get you a girlfriend at some point.
My son is 32 and he's been living with someone for 3 years. He just got engaged, so it's all over for me.
Mazel tov.
Yes, just
Maybe
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks
maybe it's
ago.
a new business for you.
No,
Um,
I'm busy enough, thanks. But go ahead. We'll go back to what were the 5-minute triggers that got you to say that he's the man?
well, I've always been very psychic, I guess. I'm not a psychic, but psychic. And when I met him, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. And there was, it was a feeling. And I just knew. It's a knowing that I had. And it felt like everything came together, the way he looked with the ponytail and the accountant's glasses and the piano key scarf. I mean, the whole thing in the snow. I don't know, it was just like a moment of everything fitting together and perfectly.
Now you say that you're a shaman, right?
Yes.
So does that already start there?
I think it started before I was even born. I think it's just something.
So can you explain to the audience who may not know what a shaman is, so that you can let them know?
A shaman really works with spiritual energy and with the earth elements. And in my particular case, I've always seen spirits. I've seen them since I was little, and I didn't tell people because, you know, one of my brothers was a little ill. I just didn't want to create any waves and talk about the things that I saw. And I still see them. And when I decided to go on my own personal healing journey, I saw so many spirits walking toward me. And I wasn't asleep. I wasn't, you know, on any kind of drug or anything. I was just sitting there and they were coming forward. And I knew that I had changed, by my healing, I had maybe changed something on another dimension.
So when you started to write your book, Beverly Hills Concentration Camp, was there this influence from the shaman side to make you heal through writing?
I think there was, but I didn't actually study with the shaman yet. But I was working with a healer who used elements of nature and encouraged me to write this book.
Okay. So you brought, after 5 minutes, you knew that you were going to marry this guy. So how long in reality did it take for you to actually get married, and what year was that?
Well, we lived together for 2 years in Chicago.
Okay.
And well, let me go back. Ben would come and visit me a lot and send me tickets to visit him. And then about 5 months later, after we had met, he asked me to move to Chicago. And I asked my mother what I should do. That sounds like a song. I asked my mother what I should do. And she said, take a chance. And it's the first time I ever listened to her, because I really, you know, it was almost like growing up. If I did the opposite of what she said, it was probably the right thing to do. And in this case, I listened to her because that's what I really wanted. And I moved, and I got an even better job than I had here in Chicago.
Were you surprised that, because it sounds to be surprising to me that your mom would say, listen. So was it a surprising outcome that she said that to you?
Yes. It's surprising that she said anything, because one of the things about her was that anytime I asked her a question, if it wasn't related to food, she was pretty silent. She didn't answer me or talk to me about anything that was very important to me, which was difficult. It was difficult because it felt like I didn't have any parents, that I was just raising myself. And I don't know, the fact that she said that was great, because it made me feel better, finally. And she loved Ben. She loved Ben from the beginning, you know?
So you were living together for 2 years, and when did you get married?
Ben, you're so good on the dates of things. Can you chime in here?
August 21st, 1994.
Okay.
Almost at our anniversary.
All right. Yeah. Nice. And so you're kind of getting to the question I was going to ask. So your mom really loved Ben. What were some of the things that stood out in your mom's eye that she really loved about Ben?
He loved her cooking.
That's a man. To my mom, that is right on track. You knew right to where her heart was, right through your stomach. So that's right. That's one of the things that would have endeared you to my mom as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, and also he sent me tickets to come to see him. You know, it was obvious that
no schnorring there. That's pretty good.
Right. Yes. Right. So he meant business. So, and also I think, sense of humor is always important to Jews, and especially to Holocaust survivors. And he'd always have some good jokes, and he'd make her laugh.
Now, obviously she speaks Yiddish, because you mentioned Yiddish. How is her English?
It's kind of broken Polish, Yiddish-ish English.
Okay.
So it's not good.
So you were married where, in Los Angeles or in Chicago?
in Chicago.
Okay. And so your mom obviously had to get, how old was your mom when you got married?
Oh, let's see. So this will be our 28th wedding anniversary.
Nice.
Whatever 95 minus 28 is.
Was it one of her first plane rides? Because it sounds
Yeah.
like your mom was pretty sedentary.
She was. I think she took me to Hawaii once, and then we went to Philadelphia for a wedding once, and that was the only time we flew together. So yeah, she came with her friends and one of my brothers, and it was great.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your parents. Ben and you are, they are in Israel or they are in the United States?
No. Both of my parents are American.
Okay.
They, my mother's father came here when he was 14 years old, from Lithuania with his younger brother, and that's it. The parents did not come. And he got to Ellis Island and he went to work in the Lower East Side in sweatshops, and he served in the U.S. Army in World War I and was awarded the Purple Heart. And when he came back to New York, I guess he had some military contracts from his experience in the Army, and he started his own sweatshop, making uniforms for the Army. And he brought his parents over and his sister, and that was already in like around 1920. And my mother's mother was actually born in Kiev in 1898, and she came here when she was 2 years old. And my father's parents came here earlier, so they were actually, my father was born here, his parents were born here.
So before you go further, so you had a whole mishpocha around you as you were growing up, but you didn't. How did that influence? No,
it was kind of dysfunctional. I would say there was as many relatives we didn't talk to as the ones we did.
Yeah, but you were lucky that you had grandparents.
I only knew my mother's mother. Both of my grandfathers died before I was born. I'm actually my mother's father's namesake, Benjamin Tietzel. You know, my father's mother didn't necessarily want my father to have me at all. It was the second marriage. You know, it wasn't so, she wasn't interested. And my mother's mother, she was a type, as we'd say in Israel. She was
A type. What does that mean?
a type.
I need a definition of what a type means.
She loved me, but she hated my mom. It was kind of weird. It was very dysfunctional, the whole thing. And so that's kind of how the relative situation was. Yes, I grew up, I had my half brother living with me from my mother's first marriage, and we were in good touch with her cousins, and but never great relationships.
How close were you with your parents?
Well, I was very close with my mom. We went to Israel together. We were kind of partners.
And your father would passed away, or?
No, my father never went to Israel. He left New York and moved to California, and then subsequently to Las Vegas, where he was working as a violinist.
So was they divorced? I'm trying to understand.
Well,
Okay.
they got divorced, and they didn't really get divorced. My father's business in New York fell apart, and his intention was to move out to LA, where he had family, well-off family, and get a job out here. And so I remember at the end of my 5th grade, we knew we were moving, but we weren't sure. My mom was considering moving to Israel or to join my dad in LA. So all the kids wrote me, and I still have that. They wrote me, good luck in Israel or Los Angeles. But in the end, my mom wanted to get as far away from my dad as she could. So we went to Israel, where she'd never been before. She didn't speak Hebrew. Basically to get away from my dad. So they never officially got divorced in the States, which worked out in her favor, because eventually when he passed, she got his pension as a vet. But it was very difficult for my mom. She was a real fighter to do that, and she'd been a housewife, She didn't really, I mean, she had an MA from Columbia University in English literature, which, you know, I don't know what you can do with that. But anyway, in Israel, she became an English teacher and Israeli. It took her a long time to become an Israeli and to speak Hebrew and all that stuff. And, you know, when that actually happened, she died young. She died at 65 in Israel. And she's buried in Haifa. My dad died when he was 71 in Las Vegas, and he never went to Israel in his whole life. I actually didn't see him for 10 years after my bar mitzvah. I didn't see him until I was 22 or 23.
Wow. So when you brought Randi home to your mom after you asked her to marry you, what was that like?
It was great. My mom loved Randi, and she thought she was great. There was apprehension at the wedding when my mom was confronted with Randi's family and realized that it was a survivor family, and she was a little bit concerned about that.
In what way? In what way?
You know, for concerned that they might have issues related to the Holocaust, and that I was marrying into that. But you know, that was already at the wedding, and it wasn't really. I really didn't understand that at the time too well. Anyway, not that it would have mattered.
Okay,
But,
so you both got married. You stayed in Chicago, and then what brought you to Los Angeles? Were your kids born in Chicago or in
No,
Los Angeles?
I had moved to Chicago for a specific job opportunity that played itself out, and then I went back to school and got my degree in film and television. And I told Randi, since I met her, you know, I never really planned to move away from Israel. I want to live in Israel. That's my home. I grew up there. That's where I felt most comfortable. I still have tons of friends there. You know, friends that are the family that you choose them. And so Randi said, okay, you know, she'd been to Israel once as a little girl, and Randi, you forgot to mention that you were in Israel once with your mom, I think, when you were 10, and which is the same year that I moved there. So we were actually a few yards from each other in Israel.
True.
At that time. But Randi was open to moving to Israel, and we did. I thought it was a great opportunity, and at time, you know, Israel had just made peace with Jordan, and this was already after the peace with Egypt. It was in the 90s. And I wanted to raise my family there. I thought Israel was a much better place to raise kids. And I felt more at home there and more comfortable there. And so we moved to Israel. We lived together in Chicago for a year, and then we moved to Israel. And Randi ended up spending 8 years there, and both of our kids were born there. So they're actually both Israelis. We're all dual citizens.
Very interesting. Okay. So you're now living in Israel, and you had children
Well,
when?
the first thing that happened after we get there is Rabin was assassinated.
Hmm.
And for me, that was, you know, one of those. Adam recently asked me, you know, what do you remember as far as, you know, historic assassinations or people that died? And I was like, yeah, Rabin and John Lennon. That would sum it up for me.
Interesting.
And you know, my sense at the time turned out to be correct. That was also not only was Rabin assassinated, but the whole peace movement was assassinated, and has not been able to be revived. I don't know that he would have been able to make peace the way he had planned with the Oslo Accord and all that stuff, but definitely the left in Israel was decimated until today by that assassination. And you know, the situation started to deteriorate. The suicide bombings, the bus bombings started happening not long after that, and it got to be a little hairy. And I was doing well in Israel. I had my own business. I built a house. We were living in the house. We had 2 kids, but Randi was not comfortable.
And why not? Why weren't you comfortable, Randi?
I felt like Rapunzel in a castle. We did have a beautiful house and everything, but there were bombs going off outside, and you know, not all the time, but enough to make me not comfortable. And I always thought we were coming back. I thought we were going to come back after 2 years, you know, but fortunately Ben's business did really well, so we stayed longer. But I wanted to raise my kids in English. I can speak Hebrew, I can read and write, but I just felt more comfortable here. I'm much more happy in the California relaxed lifestyle. So,
So when did you have children?
I believe I was 30, right, Ben? We had,
No,
I had,
you're
I
older.
had-
We had them in 99 and 2002.
yeah.
30s.
It's great having kids in Israel, I'll tell you that much. You know, when you're pregnant, everyone loves you and they'll, you know, let you cross the street first. You go to the front of the lines, you know, it's just
You get a lot of respect.
a lot of respect, a lot of love from everybody.
So
And
Liana and Adam, what do you remember about Israel?
Not a lot. I mean, we moved when I was 3, and I feel like all of my memories of Israel are pretty recent. We try to go back a lot, or since COVID, not as often, but we used to go like every 2 years. So I love Israel. I know a lot about it, but I wouldn't say like my core memories are from when I was born there and when I lived there till I was 3. So yeah.
So if you can grab a memory that you now have.
Liana actually went on Birthright, and I think
Yeah.
that shaped how she sees Israel better than I ever could.
Okay,
Definitely,
so
yeah.
one of the question I was going to ask you is, what is a memory that is memorable to you at any point in time from when you were there at 3 till now, since you're going back frequently?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of friends in Israel. That's the best part, is that my dad's like core group of friends. They all have kids, and we've always, even when I went on Birthright without my parents, when it was just me, I went to visit them. So I feel like some of the best memories I have are like barbecues where we were all together and where I met my Israeli friends, and it's so fun to go back and, you know, it's like no time has passed. So
How old were you when you went on Birthright?
I think I was either 18 or 19. I'm forgetting. I
It
think
was after your freshman year, right?
it was my sophomore year. So I think I was 19.
Okay, where did you go to school?
I went to Northeastern University in Boston.
Okay. And Adam, do you have similar memories of trips to Israel that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, same thing with me. Like, I wasn't old enough to remember when I actually lived there, but you know, all the family trips to Israel and like hanging out with people that I would have grown up with essentially if I had lived there, it kind of feels like home to a certain extent, because it's like people I've known my entire life, and I feel very connected to Israel, and you know, through family and friends, and it's really nice. I don't think I have a specific like memory or instance or anything, but just these like hanging out with them and just you know, spending days where I would just, you know, be talking with people of similar age that I've known for such a long time. It's a cool experience to have that connection.
I didn't tell you how much I love your Northern Lights background, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
So did you do a Birthright as well, or are you going to do Birthright?
I was considering it. I'm moving into a new apartment with a Jewish friend of mine. That's you know, his dad's Israeli, and he often goes to Israel. So I was thinking maybe I would go with him, but this connection kind of just came about pretty recently. So I haven't been yet, but you know, maybe next couple of years we'll see.
Okay, and what school are you attending?
I'm going to UC San Diego.
Ah, you're right by where I am. 'Cause I'm in Carlsbad. So I used to live in downtown San Diego and very close to, I used to go to, I love going to DZ Aikens. Have you gone to DZ Aikens for the deli there? Oh,
I
man.
don't believe so. No.
Oh my God, you got to go to DC Aikens. Look it up on Google.
I'm writing that down.
All right, so we have you. So I want to kind of go back, and you're now older, and I want to kind of understand how you view and what you think about your mother? Obviously, in a loving way. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I want to understand. We hear a little bit of the not so nice from Randi's growing up. But how do you view your various intervals with your grandparents, who are both survivors?
Well, just with my grandma, it's been a lot of just like fun memories for me. I think because I was the youngest and maybe she still kind of views me as like too young. It's been just like we haven't talked about anything like too dark or anything in the past. It's just been like enjoying time together.
So do you have a specific story or stories that you would like to share?
Yeah, I mean, where she lives, there's a downstairs is like cafe that's a short walk away. And I just remember when I was little, like one of my like favorite things to do would be to like go to her house and stay with her, and then we would walk downstairs together and like go on this short walk. It felt like really long to me because I was really young, and I would go over there to this cafe, and she would get stuff, and she'd always she'd always get me like a little pack of gummy bears, and that was like my favorite thing, and it was just a really nice like fun memory.
What do you call your grandmother?
Just grandma.
Okay. And how about Liana, for you, what are your memories of your grandma?
I love my grandma. Yeah, like it's always difficult knowing that, my mom struggled to kind of grow up in a house. Like I can see that was a very difficult childhood, but to me and my brother, she's been the best grandma, I think. And she definitely, like, her experiences definitely affects who she is, and that's never going to change. And it's something I always appreciated. And I think it was always interesting growing up because I would go to school and there would be like Holocaust survivors speaking in front of like the large student body. And it was always like, oh, well, my grandma is like a Holocaust survivor. I couldn't see her like getting up at, like, it was such a big deal to my friends and the people that, didn't grow up with a grandma that was a survivor. And I think that was when it really clicked for me, like, whoa, like that's crazy that's my like it's just your family until you realize to the outside world that is a crazy experience that she lived through. And I'm really, really happy that that she is who she is. I think she's amazing. So.
And do you see any differences so they often talk about generational survivor trauma somewhat jumps from one generation to another. Do you feel anything about the Shoah that you've inherited from your grandmother?
I don't know. I've heard that too. And I know it's like, I don't even know how I would know if I have that. Do you know what I mean? I don't think so. Mom, what do you think?
Adam? Well, let me ask Adam, and then you come back. I'll ask you again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure either. Like,
well, are you overprotective? I'll throw some triggers out and see what you say to these keywords. How about being overprotective?
I don't think so.
Liana?
I mean, it really depends on what, like maybe sometimes, maybe with like my friends and my family, but not really, not like that's like a personality trait of mine.
How about money traits? Spendthrift, always looking for something that you have to save for tomorrow?
I save for sure.
Yeah, a little bit, honestly.
Okay, did you hear anything about that from your grandparents?
Well, our grandma always gave us like money on the down low. Like she would just like slide us like bills, or like she'd be like behind my mom's back, she would be like, here you go. And I was like, it's fine. Like she wouldn't care if she saw. So maybe those kind of things were always like a little bit odd, but.
How about food triggers?
I like food. I eat a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely eat a lot and watch my weight, for sure. And that's been my life. So.
So do you think the weight issue is coming from your mother?
I don't know, probably. Not sure.
Okay, so I think we've gone to the second through the second episode here of the interview. You're listening to the Obligations of Memory podcast. I'm Jeffrey Geisner for the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Survivor Group on YouTube and on Facebook, and we're listening to a fascinating interview with the whole clan of the Maggid group, all four of them, mom, dad, and 2 children. So we're going to come back and we're going to talk about an amazing book called Beverly Hills Holocaust, and we're going to get into a lot of the reasons why this book was written and how it is working out and been published. So we'll see you on the other side. Stay tuned.